Weekend, millions of people in over 50 countries took to the streets to protest agro giant Monsanto. Activists accused the Missouri-based company of monopolistic business practices and called for the labeling of genetically modified foods. Monsanto controls 90% of the national soybean market, and some have suggested that GMOs like those made by the biotech conglomerate have led to a variety of health problems around the globe. In this age of food monopolization, the example of Monsanto is a scary one. But thankfully, there are alternatives. Just a few hundred miles from the nation's capital, in West Virginia, the market for locally grown organic food is booming. The Mountain States experiment in small-scale agriculture is so successful that some officials are now saying it could become a model for the rest of Appalachia and even the rest of the country. For more on this, I'm joined now from West Virginia by Anthony Flacavento, certified organic produce farmer and author of Healthy Food Systems, a toolkit for building value chains. Anthony, welcome to the show, and I understand you're in Virginia, not West Virginia. Do I have that right?
That's right, Tom. We're in the southwestern part of Virginia, which is just below West Virginia.
Okay, and part of the Appalachians, or Appalachia?
Absolutely. We're in the heart of Appalachia.
Okay. So what is aggregating, and how did all this start?
You know, in small rural communities, the sense 20 years ago, 15 years ago, was that farmers couldn't get a break. There was low prices that they faced, whether they were raising beef cattle or dairy or fruits and vegetables. And so some of us came together in Southwest Virginia, East Tennessee, and then a few years later, West Virginia, and thought, well, if we worked together and pooled the produce, the meats, the eggs of farmers into one place, maybe we could gain access to some larger markets. Maybe we could start selling to supermarkets, and colleges, and universities, public schools, things like that. And so we started that back in the late 90s, and it's grown quite a bit since then in Southwest Virginia, and just more recently, in the last 5-6 years, it's spilled over into West Virginia. Now there's folks in Kentucky doing this. It's quite exciting because basically it's allowing very small farmers, some of whom used to grow tobacco, to raise organic produce, free-range eggs, grass-finished meats, healthy foods, raised in an environmentally sustainable way, and they can make a profit doing that by working together.
That's absolutely marvelous. I understand that the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Appalachian Regional Commission are now participating in this. Tell us about this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting because 20 years ago, some of us felt like we were spitting in the wind. The cooperative extension, the land grant universities, USDA, didn't give a whole lot of time or attention to the idea of local farmers selling to local people. That was sort of a radical notion for some strange reason. So we started working on building farmers markets. We started working on aggregation. A few years later, we started bringing EBT, or food stamps, to farmers markets. And what's terrific now is that Extension, the land grants like Virginia Tech and University of Tennessee and West Virginia University and USDA are really on board with this now, mostly. Now, there's still a lot of support in USDA for Monsanto, but there's another whole segment of USDA that is really quite supportive of the local food movement, of helping small farmers, helping organic farmers. So USDA is a little bit torn about this issue right now, but we're really excited that they've at least progressed to the point where they are now willing to support local farmers raising good food for ordinary folks.
That's marvelous. In the minute we have left, I can see where something like this would be an incredible value in an area that's economically distressed, like much of Appalachia is. On the other hand, it's equally applicable, isn't it, to any part of the United States?
Absolutely. Study after study shows that you get more job creation per dollar of sales from transactions that are kind of close to home. In other words, when a local farmer sells to a local person at a farmer's market or a local grocer, you get, not only do they do better, but you get more net jobs. You get more income staying in the community. That's not only true in West Virginia, Southwest Virginia, East Tennessee. That's true in places like Iowa, in the breadbasket, where right now in Iowa they import 90% of their food, even though they're the heart of our agricultural community. So we're excited to see that this model isn't just for Appalachia. It really can work all over the nation.
That is absolutely marvelous. Anthony Flacavento, thank you so much for the great work you're doing and for sharing your story with us tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom.
stairs, and what I saw from at the top of the stairs was a man right here around the corner with his arm like this and a gun pointing up at me. All I could see was a black hat and a black jacket, and that's all I could see, and the gun. And I stood there thinking that this was the serial killer, and he's yelling at me, "Come down now, ma'am, come down right now."
They came with the director of milk control, the assistant director, and our inspector, and they all came and pretended they were just going to do an inspection, and then they did a seizure.
They showed up at 5:30 in the morning in the middle of a blizzard, and they had 42 armed federal agents and USDA officials, and they cleared out our entire barn. They took the sheep that we brought from Belgium and the Netherlands. They even took the sheep that I had brought over from New Zealand, and they took them out to Iowa, and they killed them for a disease that doesn't exist to this day.
There are two competing food systems in America. First, you have the industrial system, factory, farms, and agribusiness. Then, there's the local system, consisting of small, sustainable farms and artisanal producers. Sadly, most food production laws are designed to support the industrial operations. And the current U.S. agricultural policies could potentially destroy our local food system. I'm Kristen Canty, mom of 4. The reason I set out to make this film is because when one of my sons was 4 years old, he was a very sick child with allergies and asthma. Conventional medicine wasn't helping him, so I did some research and found out raw milk could be a remedy. I gave my son raw milk, and his allergies completely disappeared. I had to go directly to a small farm to get our raw milk. And I started buying grass-fed meats, eggs, vegetables, and fruits from a number of small local farms. As I got to know these farmers, they told me they were encountering a variety of legal problems from both the state and federal authorities. I quickly realized that my ability to buy the healthy foods I want could be in jeopardy. The industrial food system is growing and becoming more powerful. But the small, independent food system is in danger of vanishing.
Every time there is a major shakeup in the food system, local food takes a hit. And so now we have bills wending their way through Congress, for example, that would give the Food and Drug Administration the right to conduct warrantless searches on farms to find out if anything is being done that is not science-based. Well, science-based, you know what science-based is? Science-based is petroleum-based fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, antibiotics, irradiation, cloning. That's all science-based.
You know, food safety has been hitting the headlines a huge amount. And I think most people who look at it agree that there are huge food safety problems with our mainstream system. You know, it's wrong when people die from eating peanut butter. That shouldn't happen. And it happens because there are huge flaws in the mainstream food safety system. The problem is right now that Congress has sort of taken this attitude of we've got to do something about food safety, and they're out to regulate everything and everyone to the tiniest detail. And so instead of focusing on the real problems, instead of directing FDA to really enforce, to really regulate and inspect these huge facilities, which is where all of the major foodborne illnesses have been traced back to, they're saying everyone who processes food must be registered with the government. They have to pay fees. And when you regulate like that, you're going to drive these people out of business, and then consumers won't have any other options. the only option consumers will be left with is the grocery store chains buying from these huge processing plants, which is where these problems keep getting traced back to.
Our regulations are barking up the wrong tree. We absolutely have problems in this country around food safety and food security, but for regulators to prohibit small-scale, diversified production and processing of food when there's absolute evidence that that is the safest, most secure way for us to feed ourselves as a society, and to let huge corporations that are poisoning us scot-free is completely ridiculous. Now, I think somebody should have the choice, if they want to eat something that's bad for them. That's their choice, but I want to have the choice to eat something that I believe is good for me, and that belief comes from thousands and thousands of years of human experience.
I sell a lot of leafy greens to gardeners, and plants like chards, I no longer trust them because they're coming out of the Wilmette Valley over on the west coast, and they're surrounded by GMO chards and beets. I think that government needs to step up to the plate and require that everything that has a GMO product in it, any kind of food, is labeled. And every single seed that goes out there has to be labeled that it's GMO free. The government's not going to do it. It's not in their interests.
Well, I think that there's a real struggle for the government to try and make a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to food safety, and that's just not going to work because, you know, we have like maybe 2% of the farms that are smaller. It used to be only small farms. So there's got to be a way that we can protect biodiversity. We can show that sustainable farming is the only way forward. And so we need to be transitioning and thinking about protecting those farms and even growing those farms and bringing more farmers into the picture.
The regulations for the little farm say it's one farmer. It takes as long to do all the paperwork as it does to do the farming. That's okay for a huge company that employs one person to do that all the time and then has a lot of other people working. But for one little farmer, he doesn't have time to farm because he's got to do all the paperwork. The federal government took hold of it and went, we've got to make sure it's even more burdensome for the small guy and nothing for the big guy, because that's what the federal government does. It takes care of the top of the pyramid.
There is I believe, a misperception by many that local equals safe and large equals unsafe. I think that's wrong. I think we have got large people who are very safe and small local farmers who are very safe, and vice versa. So it's a mixture. And you can't simply write legislation that is going to apply to a multi-billion-dollar multinational company and expect it to fit to somebody who's a local farmer in Maryland or Massachusetts. It isn't going to work.
I have to do so much paperwork in order to be certified organic. That's sort of okay, but it's 3 inches of stuff I have to submit in order to sell this stuff that's certified organic. I don't resent being inspected. I resent the amount of work that I have to do. It's not productive. I would like to see chemical farmers have to go through this baloney and tell their customers what kind of chemicals they're using on their food that people are consuming. That's never going to happen.
If you look at the statistics, there are many fewer small farms today than there were 40 or 50 years ago. So the government really has encouraged kind of factory farming, big ag.
I think that the freedom to be able to eat what you want is absolutely critical, and you know, part of it is the freedom to be able to get what you want, you know, naturally grown foods that are, you know, that are organic, that are clean, and also knowing what you're getting. It is alarming these days to hear more and more about what's happening with farmers and certain restrictions, and they're running into trouble with the government when the people who are producing sort of the most unnatural processed foods are just running along producing all that stuff, whereas the people who are trying to do things, you know, the most natural way as it's been done